In this lesson, we'll learn how to work with animation paths by adding animation to our document navigation system. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we created our first animated objects here in InDesign. We added a simple grow animation to our gallery thumbnail images. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and move on to something a little bit more complicated in terms of animation. We're going to work with some animation paths. So let's go ahead and double click on our B Navigation Master here. And let's go ahead and zoom in down here on the document navigation. Now, if we jump out of presentation mode and take a look here, we have a group of buttons here, and each one of those buttons had a rollover event applied to them, and it was actually revealing these hidden buttons up here, so that when we moused over it, it would change in appearance, the button itself, and it would also reveal the description up here. Now what I'd like to do is I would like to actually hide this bar completely so that when the word navigation that appears here, it's at the very bottom of the stack, whenever that is appearing, we can mouse over that and these document navigation thumbnails will slide up from off the page here. So let's go ahead and look at how we might go ahead and do that. I want to select our group here. And we're going to jump over to the animation panel and notice that it currently says group. Now we can go ahead and rename this if we want to. We're not going to have to worry about renaming any of the buttons in this case. So I'm going to just call this DocNav. And let's go ahead and choose a preset here. So we're going to drop this down and I'm going to choose one of these fly in options here. Let's go ahead and choose the fly in from bottom. Now, as soon as I do that, notice what happens over to the left. The selected group of buttons actually gets this little green line that actually appears below it here. Now, if we zoom in on that really close, you can see that it has an arrow at one end. Now this little green path or line is referred to as a motion path. This is actually a vector element that is controlling the direction or the motion of this fly in from bottom preset. So let's go ahead and turn off the on page load first here. We're not going to use that on page load, but let's bounce down here in the animation panel to the animate option. You can see that currently it is set to to current location. Now, if you remember, we hit briefly on this in the previous lesson, and I mentioned, I believe we used to current location, that basically with this to current location, it's going to use the current appearance as the starting point for the animation, but the current location here is going to be used as the end point for the animation. So the object is actually going to start at the other side of this animation path, but the appearance of it as it sits right now is going to be the end point for the animation. Now, if we drop that down, you can see here by zooming out that actually goes way off the screen. We'll actually look at modifying that animation path or that motion path here in just a moment, but let's look at a couple of other options here. Notice if we drop this down, we have from current appearance and to current appearance. So from current appearance is going to basically take the current appearance and location of the object and use that as the starting point for the animation. Notice if I select that, the animation path actually moves, or the motion path here actually moves. And you can see here that the starting point of the motion path is indicated by this little filled circle. And then the end point is going to be indicated by this arrow here. Now, I know that these animate options can be kind of confusing, so I think as long as you pay attention to the motion path that appears, and it should help you to understand kind of what each animation preset or option here is going to do. Now, the other option, to current appearance, is basically going to take the current appearance and location of the object and use it as the end point for the animation. So you can see here that the arrow simply just switches directions here. So it's going to start up here and end where it currently is. So let's go ahead and switch this over to from current appearance. And let's go ahead and jump down here to the bottom of our animate panel, and this button right here is going to turn on an animation proxy. Now this also is going to be very helpful to letting you understand kind of what each one of these animation options does here. So you can see that it's basically turning on little gray boxes and using that as a proxy for where our animation is going to end up. So that should help you, hopefully. Let's go ahead and drop this down and switch it over to current location at this point. And remember, that actually dropped the animation or motion path here off of our screen. So I'm going to go ahead and select the motion path here. Now, in order to select this, we do have to have the object or objects that have the animation applied to them. We have to have those selected. Once we deselect those, that animation path, we can't select it anymore. So we'll go ahead and click on those, and I'm going to click very carefully on that motion path, and we're going to edit that here. Notice here that once I select it, it operates just like any other vector path, and we can either use our selection tool or our direct selection tool to modify this path. Unfortunately, it's actually going off of my master page here, and I can't get at the other end of it. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is let's go ahead and just grab our objects here and move them up temporarily. We'll move them up to right about there. And we'll click away and reselect them here. And now we can select that motion path, and we can get at the end of it down here. Now I'm going to need to zoom in just a bit on that to get the transform control I need. There we go. Got my up and down arrow. Well, actually, let's go ahead and undo that here. Be very careful when I click on that. There we go. We'll just slide it up about that far because what I like to do is actually use the direct selection tool. So let me grab that with my keyboard shortcut A, and I'm just going to click on the anchor point at the end of that motion path. And I'm just simply going to hold shift and drag that up some so we can shorten this path. Now, in looking at that, it doesn't look like the path is quite straight, so I may actually come over and just straighten that up just a little bit here. There we go. Use my smart guides to align that. So now that we've shortened our motion path up, let's go ahead and grab our selection tool. We'll zoom out some, and I'm going to reposition my animated group of objects here. And now that we have shortened that motion path up, we can actually see that animation proxy, so it's going to help us out. We'll go ahead and drag it and drop it right about there, and zoom in. I'm going to go ahead and select our motion path again here, and let's even just shrink it down a bit more. Just grab that here. Now, at this point, when you're working with motion paths, it can be really helpful to actually change the origin of the object you're working with here. So notice that if I select the object or group of objects that has the animation applied to it, currently the origin is set to the center of the object. If we change it here to maybe the center on the bottom edge, notice that the arrow changes, and it changes down here as well, or the top edge, just like so. Now I'm going to go ahead and leave that set just the way we had it here. I'm going to zoom in and kind of make sure these graphics are positioned just the way I'd like them to be. I'm going to use my basically control panel up here to drop that down on the y-axis just a little bit. Alright, that looks pretty good. So now we've got our animation applied here to the object. We can actually come in and actually control the duration of it. In 1 second, it's kind of long, especially if we're going to do this on a mouse over event. So let's go ahead and drop that down to maybe, we'll try half a second here. And just kind of browsing through the rest of these options here. I'm going to turn the fade for this off. I don't want it to fade. And for speed, let's go ahead and leave that as it is right now. So now I mentioned that we're going to use a rollover event to activate this animation, but we don't have a button yet created for this. Now this is going to be a perfect opportunity to create a hotspot. You remember a few lessons ago we learned about hotspots. Now the reason being is that basically I want to be able to trigger this animation, but I don't have a shape that one shape would actually control that entire rollover action. Can you look at these individual buttons, and there's gaps between them here? We have a bit of a gap here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is let me go ahead and hit Control-Alt-3. I've actually already made this shape, and it's hidden on this layer here. So this is a very simple shape. I've just made that using our Pathfinder panel. And I'm going to take that, and I'm going to drag this down. Let's go ahead and change the color of it just so we can see it here. I'm going to make it green or something like that. Let's go ahead and drag that down. I'm going to snap that into the bottom of our document here. There we go. That looks good. Now, the problem with its current position is that, obviously we're going to make this invisible, but in its current position, If we do that and apply that rollover action to it, we'll get the animation to fire off, but remember each one of these thumbnails actually has rollover animation or rollover events as well. So the fact that this hotspot is on top of those may prevent those rollovers from actually happening. So what I want to do is jump over to my layers panel, and let's go ahead and we're going to reorder our layers just a little bit here. I tell you what, I have that shape selected. I'm going to create a button out of that really quickly. I'm going to call this DocNav Hotspot. And let's go ahead, and now that we have it named appropriately over here, I'm going to drag it underneath the DocNav group right here. So we'll go click and drag that here. Alright, so now it's underneath that, but yet it's over all these hidden buttons right here. So we should be able to hit this shape without having to worry about these buttons getting in our way. So at this point, let's go ahead and apply an event to our hotspot. We're going to come over and let's apply the on rollover event. And we're going to choose to activate an animation here under the Swift only options. Now when we do that, we have the option to choose the animation. So I'll go ahead and make sure we choose DocNav here. And I want to choose to play that animation. Now I do want to actually turn this option on to reverse the animation when we roll off of the button here. So with that done, let's go ahead and preview this here. I'll hit Control-Shift-Enter, and we'll let InDesign think for just a moment. Let me go ahead and mouse over down here. And you can see here now our document navigation actually pops up whenever we mouse over that hotspot here. And you can see that the rollovers for each individual thumbnail are also still working. Now, this has been sort of an introduction to motion paths. I want to go ahead and show you really quickly another animation that I've kind of already created in this particular document. We're going to jump over here to page 4. Now I've kind of been working on this sidebar area here, and I've gone ahead and I haven't created the animation yet, but I've created several buttons. Now I've slid this particular sidebar off to the side a bit, and I've basically set up two buttons here, a hide button and a client info button. And when we click on the client info button, it's going to reveal the hidden hide button. And when we click on the hide button, it's going to hide itself and reveal the client info button. So I've already set up those events. If you want to check those out, you can look over here in the buttons panel. But I tell you what, let's do. Let's quickly go ahead and group these all together here. I'll hit Control-G after selecting all those. Let's undo that here. It looks like we lost some text. We'll go ahead and select those individually here. Group those together. There we go. We haven't lost anything now. So now what I want to do is I want to apply an animation preset. So let's jump over here, and I've actually saved a preset for the animation here. If we drop down the presets, we'll see this sidebar option. And you can see here that with the sidebar option, it's actually maintained the exact size and position of the motion path. I've configured that to sit right there on the edge of the edge of our document. And I may come over here and adjust timing. I think 0.5 is pretty good. And for speed, I might choose, we want that to ease out, just so it's a little slower as it snaps into position right here. But if you'd like to look at what this particular animation looks like, you might look in your project files for the HTML file 15_example. If you open that up in your web browser, you should see something sort of like this. You can see here that this is the entire document, so we can navigate using our page-to-page navigation or our document navigation. But you can see here that that exact same navigation setup is working for our document navigation. And if we come over here and mouse over our client info button, it actually has a rollover state applied, and we click on it, and it's going to reveal our client information in the sidebar here. So this is something I plan on doing on each of the 6 featured works pages for this document. I tell you what, in between lessons, go ahead and hook this up and see if you can get that working in your own version of the project file. I'll go ahead and apply that to a few of the other pages here in the document, but when we come back here in the next lesson, I want to continue our conversation about motion paths, and I want to show you how that we can create our own custom motion paths.